After consulting with our top government health professionals, I have decided to take several strong but necessary actions to protect the health and well-being of all Americans. To keep new cases from entering our shores, we will be suspending all travel from Europe to the United States for the next 30 days. The new rules will go into effect Friday at midnight. These restrictions will be adjusted subject to conditions on the ground. There will be exemptions for Americans who have undergone appropriate screenings, and these prohibitions will not only apply to the tremendous amount of trade and cargo, but various other things as we get approval. Anything coming from Europe to the United States is what we are discussing. These restrictions will also not apply to the United Kingdom.
So that was the biggest policy moment last night during the president's address. And that was I'll be honest, that for me, that was kind of the oh crap moment, because that's a real escalation. Stopping flights from China, you could say, well, why is that so different? Well, one, as much as China's a billion people, we tend to think of China as one country. Stopping flights from all of Europe, and I believe we have significantly more air travel from Europe to the U.S. than we do from China, just felt like it got a whole lot closer to us. Maybe that's just a perception thing, but that was a moment where it's clear the administration is now, as I said at the top, I mean, this is wartime Trump. You are seeing wartime Trump right now. Decisions that are being made will affect lives. The federal government has a role to play here, the same way the federal government, usually we talk about just letting the market do its thing. And no, we can't just let the market do its thing on this. There is a government response, the same way that it wouldn't be left to, the free market if North Korea invaded California tomorrow. This is where the government has a role, as well as a massive role for the private sector. I'm going to tell you this, if we see a cure, or more likely, and I think in a sense even more, a cure is going to be a vaccine, and who knows when that will actually be on the market. Although I do believe they have a vaccine now for Ebola, for example, which years ago people thought maybe that was a challenge we would not be able to meet so quickly. It's going to take a while. A treatment, though, for this, I mean, what has to happen is have something that helps people, that even just suppresses the attack on lungs. That's really where this goes. It causes interstitial pneumonia in both lungs. And once it gets in the lungs, in both lungs, and the inflammation and the difficulty breathing and the strain that puts on the rest of the organs, and that's where in the particularly at-risk populations you have the fatalities coming. And also where you have people who are in an ICU for 2-3 weeks, perhaps even more, under very precarious and uncomfortable and difficult circumstances, right? I mean, the mortality rate, unfortunately, is not the only thing to really be concerned about here. We're also going to have people that are in the ICU for a month, 2 or 3 weeks, maybe more. That's what's going to happen. And they're not going to be in the ICU able to get visitors, and it's going to be tough for a while there. It's very and also it's going to be a fight, right? It's one thing to be in the ICU if your prognosis is you're going to be fine, just give it time, which, I mean, I guess then you'd probably be considered stable. I don't know how long you'd be in the ICU, but if you're on a ventilator, I mean, that's going to be a closer fought battle than any of us ever want to be in that position. So look, this is where we get into now the travel ban and how that might help. And look, it is going to help. And I'm a little bit stunned to see that there are people out there, and this is where we get into some of the politics of this, right? Look, today's a sober day, a solemn day in a sense on the show, right? We're going to ease into some other topics and some other things, but right now, I mean, the country, like I said, it's a wake up call. And we're at war with a virus. That's what's happening right now. I said, I think to you even just yesterday, there's going to be a day when I come in. I knew it was going to happen given the trend in the last 2 weeks or so. I didn't know it would be here right away. I didn't know it would be here now, but that's where we are. We are at, as I said, we're not at DEFCON 1. This is not all out. We don't have martial law. We're at virus DEFCON 3. We're at maybe DEFCON 2, but DEFCON 3 for sure. So the president talks about this travel ban, and what could be more intuitive than, the big concern, you have to understand, the concern that all the policymakers have right now, that everyone's trying to figure out, is not only stopping the spread of this, but elongating the curve in the spike of cases. Because this is make-believe math, so these are not real numbers. But let's say in a country you have, I'll just say in a make-believe country too. Let's say the country of Pakistan has 10,000 beds for ICU patients and 5,000 ventilators, right? Which, let's just say that that's the case. And you bring in, and you have 100 cases of coronavirus. And of that 100 cases, you have 10 people who need that critical care. You're in good shape. But if you have 1,000 people who are cases of coronavirus and they spread it, and then all of a sudden you have 15,000 cases, you only have 10,000 beds, and they all come in at the same time, because the spread has been allowed to happen very rapidly all at once because there have not been mitigation measures. Then you get people that are in the hallway at the hospital unable to breathe, and the doctors are having to do triage as though we're in a mass casualty disaster like an earthquake that's killed thousands of people, or a mass casualty terror attack, or something where they're just trying to keep as many people alive as they can and making decisions about who's going to live and who's not. So even if you only have 10,000 beds and you end up having 100,000 cases, but you only have, let's say a few thousand a month coming through, your medical system can handle that. If you get, 20,000 cases in 1 month and only 10,000 beds, now you got a huge problem. So the timing of the spread of the virus really does matter to the public health, to the health system in general. And that's why limiting flights, everything that we can do to keep the numbers low as long as we can, is critical. And yet you have people out there like Obama White House Ebola czar Ron Klain, who says this, play 13.
Look, I think part of this, Rachel, is the classic Trump distraction tactic. He wants to see progressives debate the travel ban, so on and so forth, and not come after where he has failed. We have tested 5 people out of every million in this country. In Korea, they've tested 2,000 people out of every million in their country. There is no reason why South Korea doesn't have technology we don't have, or a healthcare system we don't have, or anything we don't have. It is a failure of leadership of the Trump administration. He is doing anything he can to move the conversation elsewhere, to get us to talk about something else, and not focus on the fact that even tonight, even in that Oval Office address, all he can say about testing is, we're going to do more of it sometime, some number of people,
we're getting to it.
We're getting there, right? That's job one. That's job number one.
Travel ban as a distraction is a reckless and stupid thing to say. I'm paying attention to what actual experts are saying about all this different stuff, and there have been conflicting numbers. I saw early on people who were saying that they were thinking the numbers, the mortality. Remember, the mortality rate we're initially told was 3.6%, around there. In Italy right now, they're estimating it's at 6%, which is very high, which is why Italy is really this case study that has everyone so concerned. Now it looks like global mortality is closer to 1%, but that's still 10 times the flu's mortality rate, which is 0.1%, right? So the numbers are changing, the data is changing. Just because an expert says one thing today doesn't mean they're not going to be wrong or change their opinion tomorrow. But I've seen no experts who make the case that limiting travel from, actual medical experts who care about keeping people alive. Ron Klain's a political operative. He's a hack, okay? He's worked for, the Clintons, the Obamas. This is what this guy does. And he was put in charge of the Ebola response by the administration. Ebola is much easier to contain than this virus. The Wuhan virus is airborne, is easy to contract, and is spread rapidly through casual contact. Ebola, you have to get someone's blood in your system, basically. You have to get their actual excretions in your system. That's different. There weren't clouds of blood in the air that people could walk through and get Ebola from. That's not how it works. So it's a lot easier to contain. But my point here just being, what this guy's saying is unhelpful. This is exactly the kind of cheap, petty politics when people are really worried right now. I'm sure every person out there who's taking a lot of time out of their day to trash Trump and say that he's doing a bad job on this has people that they're worried about. I mean, I have people in my life that I have elevated concern for because they're at higher risk. And look, anybody's at risk in a sense. I mean, we got this kind of a disease. You don't know how your system's going to react. I'm not trying to scare people more than we're already scared, but nobody wants to get this. Nobody wants to get this, especially people that are in the higher risk category. But everybody should be concerned about it. Why pretend that the travel ban is not something that's going to have any effect that's helpful? If the whole problem is or I should say, if the primary effort right now is trying to prevent there being a huge immediate spike in cases, limiting the influx of people from places where they've already had or are undergoing right now a particularly high percentage of people infected with this virus, of course that's a good idea. And to focus on the community spread, this is a walk and chew gum situation. Yes, we focus on community spread and we stop the importation of the disease. It's very straightforward when you think about it, but there's a lot of nonsense from brainless Democrats out there right now who are taking this as an opportunity to, they think, and I have to say this needs to be, there are people for whom, Russia collusion and the Ukraine impeachment and, all this stuff that they've been saying about Trump, and they've just been wrong. They've been wrong and wrong and wrong and lies and wrong. Now they think that they finally have an opportunity to get their way and bring about the end of this administration, and they can't even think straight about what's happening in the country right now. Pardon me. They can't even think straight about that because they're so focused on using this to score points against the president. It's very disheartening, and we should all be on guard against this because they're also... this guy is somebody who was an Ebola containment czar under Obama, and he's going on TV to tell millions of people that the travel ban doesn't matter, which then is going to involve those people, going to result in those people saying, well, then why are they doing it? Maybe we shouldn't have a travel ban. They'll put pressure on the administration, pressure on their elected officials that we shouldn't have a travel ban, and he's just saying this because he's looking to score points against the administration. I mean, that's really gross. That's really grotesque. It's a dumb thing to say. I've heard people who are medical experts now put forward on this issue specifically. They're like, yes, limiting flights, limiting spread, absolutely the way to go right now. So why say that it's a distraction? Why be so flippant about this? People are showing you who they are in this whole ordeal, especially people in authority, people in the media, people that have influence over what you think about what's happening in this country and around the world. And many of them are using it recklessly. And I also think there'll never be any soul searching over this, but the same media that has been lighting their credibility on fire for years to attack the Trump administration now turns around and says, why don't you believe everything we say about this and that none of it is political? Well, because they've cried wolf, because they have sold their credibility. They've sold their credibility for short-term audience gain, for placating the Trump deranged left. That is what they have been doing. So, of course, we take that into account. But, I mean, that was very, very troubling. I mean, look, here's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Jim Acosta is out there, and Jim, I don't know Jim Acosta. I got to tell you, it's amazing to me that CNN thinks that this isn't just completely, that he's not an example of something that he just destroys their credibility. I mean, if anyone's being honest, Jim Acosta is an activist. He's playing games all the time. But here he is. He has access to the President of the United States, and he does have, unfortunately, a very large platform from which to inform the American public. And he is asked, as a White House correspondent meant to convey information to the public after the president gives a speech from the Oval Office, he is asked to, bring context and analysis to it that's helpful at a time of real national concern. And here is what he does with that that ability. Play clip 10.
At one point during this address, the president referred to the coronavirus as a, quote, foreign virus. That I think was interesting because as I was talking to sources earlier this evening, one of the points that the president wanted to make tonight, wanted to get across to Americans, is that this virus did not start here, but that they're dealing with it. Now, why the president would go as far as to describe it as a foreign virus, that is something we'll also be asking questions about. But it should be pointed out that Stephen Miller, who is an immigration hardliner who advises the president, is one of his top domestic policy advisors and speechwriters, was a driving force in writing the speech. And I think it's going to it's going to come across to a lot of Americans as smacking of xenophobia.
What a bunch of morons. I mean, really. It is a Chinese virus. It did come from China. And the Chinese government suppressed information in the beginning that could have given the whole world a head start on developing tests, vaccines, cordoning off people, creating measures to help with public safety. Yeah, that's all. That's true. That's real. And the Chinese government is actively lying to its own population, trying to blame America for this. That's happening right now. There is a Chinese government propaganda effort to blame America because this is going to have, global financial implications. Could last for quite a while. The implications of it. I mean, who knows? I mean, no one really knows how long this whole thing's going to continue on in any respect. So that could happen. And now we look at this and we say to ourselves, okay, well, should we just allow the Chinese government to rewrite history and lie? Should they be able to tell the whole world, including their own population, that America is responsible for this? This happened because someone in China was selling rare animals in what's called was being called a wet market, an open air market in Wuhan City, in Hubei province in China. That's what, or it escaped from the virology institute that happens to be 10 miles away, which wouldn't be the first time that a infectious virus has escaped from that institute at all. It's one of those two things. So yeah, it's Chinese. Why can't we speak about this honestly? No one's blaming the Chinese people for it, but we're trying to describe a thing. And why do they waste our time getting into this? I mean, look, CNN. You'd think that now they'd raise the bar. Now they'd be serious. They can't. You shouldn't trust them. You shouldn't respect them. Oh man, I'm trying to find, silver linings where I can and look at the future here. We're going to be good, folks. It's going to be all right. I'm very confident. Shields high. We're going to be okay. But we do need to be ready for what's coming because we are just seeing the beginnings of the storm, I think, and it's going to hit our shores and the whole country very soon.
And so we have targeted our relief. It's aimed at people, not at big corporations, not at some kind of general long-term economic plan that the president might want for other purposes. It seems the president seems to be more worried about the health of the big banks than the health of Americans. We don't believe that works. And so the administration is proposing tax cuts and bailouts for the airline industry, the oil and gas industry. That's just out of touch. The bottom line, we need to put people first.
All right, let's talk about the response now. I've told you a lot about where we are, what the threat is that we face, how we need to come together. I've tried to minimize the politics. But as I said, politics is a discussion that involves policy, and policy at the national level, at the local level, is part of our response right now. So I want to bring in our friend David Harsanyi from National Review to speak with us a little bit about this. David, thanks for making the time.
Always a pleasure. Thanks.
All right. First, the people are talking about bailouts, stimulus, Fed policy, helping the airline industry, helping the cruise industry. What do you make of? Let's start on the economic side of all this. What do you make of the actions the administration talked about, that Trump talked about last night, and that now Democrats are passing bills to try and do something?
Well, the truth is I don't know. I mean, in the sense that I don't know that we know exactly what is going to happen over the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, as far as the economy. seems to me, I'm no expert, that there will be a recession because you have so much, inactivity economically because of this, that it will have an effect. Obviously, you see it in the markets. As a rule, I'm not for bailouts because I don't think they work. However, this is not a normal situation where you have, an industry that hasn't acted in the best interest of has been greedy or been giving loans they knew they wouldn't get back. I mean, you have here an existential threat that's a virus. It's not like something the economy is telling you. It's just outside of that. So perhaps we need to help the economy. I don't know is the real answer yet, because I don't know that we know how bad it's going to be.
All right, let's talk about.
Well, let me just quickly add, but the Democratic bill is like a goodie list of their usual stuff. So I'm not sure just passing something to pass something's going to be helpful. So I hope the president thinks about that.
Right. So that's. I mean, it's not surprising. People are trying to leverage this for politics right away. It is a little bit disheartening. Well, here. First, let's take this before I'm trying so hard to avoid the partisan food fight today, at least, because it feels like this should be beyond it. Here's what Trump said about what he's going to do. Play 3, Mark.
To ensure that working Americans impacted by the virus can stay home without fear of financial hardship, I will soon be taking emergency action, which is unprecedented, to provide financial relief. This will be targeted for workers who are ill, quarantined, or caring for others due to coronavirus. I will be asking Congress to take legislative action to extend this relief. Because of the economic policies that we have put into place over the last 3 years, we have the greatest economy anywhere in the world by far. Our banks and financial institutions are fully capitalized and incredibly strong. Our unemployment is at a historic low. This vast economic prosperity gives us flexibility, reserves, and resources to handle any threat that comes our way.
What do you think about all that?
Sounds fine. I don't know that, he's not very specific about what that means, but obviously people are quarantined and people are sick, and if there's some relief for them, I don't see why we shouldn't want that. I would say as far as I see it, he's right about the economy in the sense that once people feel like this is over, there's no real underlying problem with the economy that shouldn't allow us to bounce back strongly afterwards. But then again, if it hits, really badly and lots of people are dying, God forbid, then I don't know what's going to happen or how people will feel. And the problem for me has been that I would read one story and I'm like, it's not going to be that bad. We're just overreacting as usual. Then I read the next story and I'm like, oh my God, we're all going to die tomorrow. And I go back and forth all day, and I'm not sure what to think about it. And that's a separate problem we have, I think.
Well, that was what I was going to ask you next. Where do you fall on the spectrum right now? I've been pretty bullish, I guess. I've been pretty confident that I knew it was going to hit us. I knew there'd be cases, and I knew there were going to be fatalities from this. But I've been thinking that it's going to be okay. I mean, the stuff that's really gotten me, and I think a lot of people rattled, isn't even so much the cancellations and everything. It's these stories coming out of Italy are pretty terrifying.
Right. So that's why everyone talks about flattening the curve and all that stuff. I'm typically not hysterical about these things. Most things don't turn out as bad as we think. And I suspect that will be the case here as well. But that doesn't mean. So I think there's a wide range of positions you can take between hysteria and between dismissing something. And I think Trump was a little too dismissive in the beginning. There are, even if it's, not worst case scenario, there are a lot of elderly people in this country and a lot of immunocompromised people and a lot of people who are nervous about this sort of thing. And I think we need to take that seriously. I think he's been better since then. But also hysteria is crazy. I mean, panicking and almost being gleeful about the economic ruin that might fall upon us simply because it might help you with your politics. It's just really gross. And I just feel like there aren't a lot of grown-ups out there when it comes to this sort of stuff. And I think that's a separate problem that we have to face at some point, that we don't know who to trust because everyone has some sort of political angle. And I think that's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I played before the audio from the former Ebola czar. He's just a lawyer and a chief of staff who worked for a bunch of Democrat administrations, Ron Klain. and he was saying that the travel ban is just a distraction tactic. He went on Rachel Maddow's show in front of millions of people. I mean, I think that that's reckless. I actually think that crosses a line from like I don't like what he's saying to this is a guy who's telling people things, who's advocating against a position that could save lives and is therefore actually imperiling lives. And doing so, he must know that like we don't want to have a whole bunch of flights coming in from Milan, Italy, right? Like he's not a total moron.
Right. Well, I think that's why, folks like him, it's why we can't trust what we're being told. And, I mean, the idea, listen, here's the thing. Literally nothing the president was going to do was going to be okay for a bunch of people out there. They were going to, either it was going to be enough, it was going to be too much, it was going to be too stupid. There is nothing he can do that is going to make them feel or, satisfy them. So I think we need to ignore those kinds of people. I do get worried when I hear, a doctor or, I forgot his name now, but they leaked his testimony or whatever, and he says 150 million people might get coronavirus. Okay, now show me your charts and tell me how you came to that, because that seems really, really bad. And I think that's the sort of panic I really hate, because you're just throwing a remark out there without any context. It's very difficult to find it.
Just what are you thinking now in terms of what you want to do next, and what your what is your risk tolerance right now? I mean, are you social distancing and then some? I mean, where are you putting your own sense of how you're going to comport yourself here going forward? I'm not sure that's the right word, but you know what I mean. How you're going to conduct yourself. There you go.
No, I have social distance for a long time. I work in my own office, and I am not a social butterfly. I'm not out there most of the time, but obviously I live in the real world and I have kids, and I worry about that, especially one of them is immunocompromised, and I feel like, I keep her home right now, even though I know, listen, when you're a parent, you're not going to be rational about that stuff. I realize I'm in the real world, I have to be rational, but when you have your own kids, you're like, whoa, so why not just keep them home and be safe and, wash your hands and do all the right things. That's what I try to do. I mean, it's out of our control to some extent. When Tom Hanks gets it, that really hits you. You're like, even famous people who are well taken care of can get sick. So, but in the end, I feel like it's probably not going to be as bad as Italy. I just feel like in some sense we're just better prepared and we can move faster, and because of our economy we can deal with these things. So and when I leave this house actually and go out into the real world, I'm actually heartened to see that normal people don't act with the kind of hysteria that we see on Twitter, etc. They're just going about their business, I think, as best as they can.
And Twitter has been, especially in blue check journalist world, I feel like it's been worse than it has ever been in the last week or so. I think this is like the ugliest. I mean, I told people before, I went on Bill Maher's show, and my message was, we all want this to work. We all want Trump to do his best. This is really beyond politics. And I mean, I actually had people writing me messages like that they hope that, I and everyone I know gets coronavirus and dies. You mentioned that the gleefulness, there's a deep psychological sickness in American politics that this actual sickness, I think, is showing us in ways. It reminds me a little bit of right after 9/11, there were people, and I've told stories about this, there were people who were like, yeah, America got what, Americans who were like, yeah, we got what we deserved.
Yeah. No, I think this is the worst. It's a cesspool. It's been completely unhelpful. It's, rather than help guide us, because Twitter can be amazing, and not just Twitter, social media, where you connect to people who have, in ways instantaneously, where they can help each other figure out what's going on in the big picture, right? That's not what happened. You just have rumors, you have idiocy, you have, people who, no matter what Trump says, they're going to be angry, and other people, frankly, who will defend Trump no matter what he's doing as well. So everything becomes politics, and it's very difficult to get like a good read on what, the threat, and maybe people don't know, what the threat is. I don't know. But, I've basically tried to turn it off for the most part because it's not been helpful, and that's a shame, because it is an amazing technology when you really think about it. It should be much, much, much more helpful.
Do you think that the administration has reached a point where they're locked in terms of how serious they should be and how focused they are on this?
They seem to be headed in that direction. Initially, I didn't think so. And obviously, I don't know if you've read these stories, but, because you have such a big centralized bureaucracy with the CDC, literally this doctor in Seattle broke the law to try to help and track this and did a pretty good job. So I think that after this, we need to rethink how we deal maybe in a more decentralized way.
Well, I have mentioned that story, and I've been saying to people, this is where, in the early days it was, the CDC funding and everything else. And I'm like, I told people, I worked for the CIA, which, has a lot of funding and a lot of people working for it and thinks it's really pretty high speed and cool. And if people knew the mistakes that go on there, I can't even imagine. Look, the fact of the matter is that if you're going to be a researcher in the medical profession, CDC, I'm sure, is a good place to go before you go into other places. But I think Big Pharma is more likely to actually come up with something that's really going to help this in the next 6 to 12 months than the CDC will.
Oh, my God, yeah. I mean, you can't foresee this stuff sometimes, so I don't know how quickly they can move either, but obviously they move far quicker than government. And, I already saw, there's rumors about vaccines being created in Israel and other places with these pharmaceutical companies. The CDC is a disaster. It started out as a agency to help fight malaria, right? And now, it's a massive budget. Spends most of its time telling us what fruits we should be eating and how much we should be walking and stuff that's none of its business. It's a massive, massive budget, and it hasn't really been cut at all. That's just a myth anyway. But I've been writing about the CDC for a long time, and they're just a nanny state organization. They have far more important things to be worried about. But still, I wouldn't want them in control of it. I think I trust pharma companies far more than I do, any kind of centralized group. And also, think about this. You have China or Italy, and I'm not saying they have the similar kind of centralized, socialized medicine, but they are centralized, right? And their reactions have not been good at all. So I don't know that, and we'll see these other countries, how they're going to deal with it now. So I don't know that there's any there's not one answer to this kind of thing, and it's difficult no matter how prepared you are. People don't have to realize that you don't always have some solution to everything immediately.
All right, well, good luck with the social distancing. Keep yours close at hand and safe. And, David, we always appreciate you making the time to chat with us. Thank you.
Anytime. You too.
They keep telling us that we need to be adults and that Trump needs to be an adult and that, that this is all about rising above partisan rancor and all this stuff. Here's a tweet from Hillary Clinton from this morning. I know this is all hard for you, real Donald Trump, so let me spell it out. Free testing, fee waivers, emergency sick leave, quarantines, cancellations, giving a damn. Do you really think the president doesn't give a damn? The president might end up getting coronavirus. I assure you, the president gives a damn. But why do that? Can't put that on hold for just a few weeks here, even a few days. They're all talking about how we have to come together and face this and do what is necessary, and then they turn around immediately and they want to lecture all of us. Here's another example. There's all this fighting over whether we should call it Wuhan virus, whether that's racist or not, or Chinese coronavirus. Here's how the media was referring to it as of about a week and a half ago. Play clip 1.
The Wuhan coronavirus has now surpassed the 2003 SARS outbreak.
The first U.S. case of Chinese coronavirus was confirmed at one of her hospitals.
Inside that building is the world's first lab-grown copy of the Wuhan coronavirus outside mainland China.
The Chinese coronavirus death toll has jumped to at least 26 people.
The death toll from the Wuhan coronavirus spiked today.
The Chinese virus, the coronavirus that is worrying the whole world.
This comes as the Chinese coronavirus death toll has jumped to at least 26 people and sickened at least 835 people.
Did they just discover xenophobia and racism in the last week? Those are all different shows on major cable news networks, all calling it either Chinese or Wuhan coronavirus or whatever. So was that racist, or I just want to know what the rules are here? I know there are more important things, although you could play that game with everything, right? So now, are we allowed to talk about the toilet paper shortage? Or just, there's more important things. Are we allowed to talk about, what it's like to live in the world that's in the midst of this, or do we have to just all sit around and look at the statistics and be terrified all the time? Life has to go on. We have to, move on together. That's why I said we're going to do this show day in and day out. We have things to talk about. I'm sorry we haven't done a greater range of topics today. I meant to get to some other things, but look, right now, the truth is this is the single biggest thing by far. Nothing else even comes close to this story in the entire world, never mind just here in America. So that's why we've been spending the time on it that we have. What do I see? I wanted to tell you a little bit of what I see coming here, just so we can get on the same page with that. I'll have some other thoughts for you on, there was a Supreme Court victory, well, short-term victory at least, for the Trump administration on something that does still matter. And then producer Mark and I will kind of, take a breather by having you guys tell us what you think in roll call.